Welcome back to the channel, folks. For those tuning in for the first time, my name's Travis Rhodes. And if you don't subscribe to the channel already, please do. I try to put out a new video every week. Tonight, I want to share a really simple editing trick that I use in Lightroom that really controls the high dynamic range of some images that I shoot. Sometimes you have a really high contrast scene that you really don't want to edit two different images and blend together. And I've got a trick that is an often overlooked tool in Lightroom called the auto mask feature in the localized brush adjustments. It allows you to really take control of your edits when you're editing a high dynamic range scene that has a lot of contrast between the lights and the darks. So let's get started. So we'll start off with a really easy one tonight. And this is one that's a bird in flight. I see this a lot where you'll be shooting a scene like this and the sunlight is behind the bird and you can't really see the details of the bird in your image. And a lot of people will just come up here to the brush tool and they'll start trying to paint it in to bring out some of the bird. And then they come in and start trying to bring the image up and trying to control it, and all of a sudden you've got this really ugly edit that then people come in and try to feather it out, and all of a sudden you have this really terrible edit that just doesn't look very good. And there's multiple ways to go about editing an image like this. You could do it that way, which doesn't look really good, and I don't suggest it. You could also come in and just manipulate the shadows. And that does a pretty decent job. But my problem with just editing the shadows of an image is that that just targets the shadows, and then you can't really do anything else to it. Everything else that you do on the image ends up being a global edit. And for this, you really want to do a targeted edit, because you see, as this bird has shown up, he's losing some of his contrast, he's losing some of his color, he's a little green. You can't edit any of that unless you do a localized brush adjustment. And so that's why when I'm working with a high dynamic range scene like this, I will use the brush adjustments tool right here. But then I come down and make sure that auto mask is turned on, because auto mask is incredibly powerful and incredibly useful when editing a picture like this. You can start out with a large brush zoomed in on your subject that you're trying to edit, and you can see a little bit that it's just editing only the bird. What I do a lot of times is I will select the Show Selected Mask overlay, little feature down here. And on this, you can see now that the stuff that's red on screen, that's what's being adjusted by your local adjustment with the auto mask. Notice how clean that is, even in the feathers. I always try to zoom in and work on the smaller details with a smaller brush to make sure that it only gets applied to what I want. But look how clean that automatically selects the feathers of that brush. And it even goes in and out of the little details around the little ends of the feathers where the bird's feathers are split or frayed. The way this works is it's working on selecting by the luminosity of the pixels. So if I start with my adjustment brush here in the dark area of the bird, you can see that when I get to the blue edge, it does not edit that blue edge. It doesn't affect it. if I were to start out here and work in, it didn't want to immediately start working on the bird. And I could go around the other way. If the bird was the right exposure and everything else was too dark, I could go in and edit the sky and not the bird. But in this case, I want to edit the bird. So I'm just going to keep painting him in. And I can see where the effect is going to be done on the image with the red masking that Lightroom is showing me. So I'll just go around the edges. And you can see this is in real time. I'm not speeding this up. I'm not going super slow. I'm just making sure that when I start my adjustment brush painting, I'm in the dark area, working my way to the outsides. And I'll go around the entire bird and do that. And it's just really, really accurate. And this way, I'm not going to have a nasty halo around the bird, because the background scene, the blue sky is exposed the way I want it to. It looks how I want it to look. The bird, on the other hand, was a little dark because that bird was flying overhead and, well, the sun was above him. But I still want to see some of his details, because the last time I checked, I can't fly like a bird, so I have a hard time taking a picture of the bird from above while they're flying through the sky. So now I have my bird painted in just the way I want him. Looks a little funny there in red, but now that I know I've got the bird painted in just where I want it, I can turn off the mask feature, and I can come back into my adjustments panel, and I can brighten him up. I'm going to go ahead and zoom back in a little bit so that you can see the adjustments we're making to the bird. So you see he's a little green and a little cold. So now, because I'm using a targeted adjustment that's affecting only what I painted, I can adjust all of these other parameters on this bird. I can put in some red tint to him. I can give him some contrast again. One of the things I find with increasing the exposure this much is sometimes a little bit of dehaze brings back some of the contrast that is lost by raising the shadows this much. I'll add in just a little bit of clarity because it's a bird, a little bit more texture. But I can adjust this as much as I want to. I can go 4 stops and he looks kind of funny, but that shows you that it's not affecting the rest of the sky. It's not affecting the sky at all. But I can bring that up by 2 full stops. I can increase the sharpness. I can reduce the noise. All of these things I can do independent of the rest of the image because I'm using this localized adjustment brush with the auto mask feature. I can increase the saturation just a little bit to bring some of his color back. So now I've got a bird that I can see the whole bird, and I haven't adjusted the rest of my image, because if I just came in and adjusted the highlights on the whole image and then the shadows, the bird starts to just get a little grainy and ugly. So using the targeted adjustment of the localized brush adjustment with the auto mask feature is really taking control and fine-tuning your adjustments. But that's a really easy one. And sure, maybe that works real well. What about something that's a little more difficult? Surely it's not as easy on a more difficult subject. Well, I would say that this is a pretty difficult subject. And once again, I could come in and just drag my shadows slider up and drag my highlight slider down like I see so many people recommend you do when you first start out on an image, and go from there. But now I've got this nice warmth in the sky and all of this is so much colder and it just doesn't feel right. And I can't adjust that all by itself without doing a localized adjustment. Now I could do it really sloppy and really lazy and come into my adjustment panel and I could turn, not having the auto mask on, and I could try to do it, you know, come in here and paint it like that, and come in and do this, and do it real messy like, you know, real fast, because I don't really want to take much time on my editing. And I could do that, and it does okay. But if I get a little sloppy with it, you know, who's going to say? You know, I don't want to get in here, so I'm just going to kind of blend all this together, and you know, I just won't take my time with it. And I start adjusting it, and oh, a little much, and you know, well, whatever. You can go do that, or you could do it the right way, in my opinion, using the localized adjustments brush. Again, making sure you have auto mask turned on. Zooming in to 1:1 is a good place to start. And just start painting in your adjustment. Again, starting from the dark and working your way to the light. Turn on your mask so that you can see what's being affected. And then you can go right up the side of the building. Just that quickly. Just right up the side of the building. Start in the building and work your way right up to the edge. Is it going to have a problem with all this up here? Not if you start inside the building. It just automatically selects the dark parts of the image and applies the mask and the edit only to those parts. The lighter part that's a little less dark red will have a little less applied to it, because it's smart like that. Those windows are lighter than this dark part of the building. I don't want them to be super bright. Oh wait, oops, I accidentally went over a little bit. Well, the erase tool works in the exact same way in the opposite. It will use the auto mask feature also. So I can come in and I can just lightly erase right up to the building, and it's gone. You have two options for brushes, brush A and brush B. I'm usually only using brush A. And when I'm painting in my adjustments like this, I usually leave the flow at 100% and the feather at 50. That way I get a little bit of a soft edge to it. But again, I'm just painting in my adjustments, going through my image. Yes, it takes a little bit of time, but it will turn out to be a better edit in the end. Just slowly going around the image and taking my time, working from the dark parts of the image toward the lighter parts of the image. And notice, it even gets in all those little details. All those little spires and things going on that building, it picked them all up, and I didn't have to go in and do each one of them with a teeny tiny brush. But because they are dark and the sky behind it is light, it knows to just auto mask out the light part and only get the dark part. Dark buildings like this here are super easy. They don't take much time at all. It's really easy for Lightroom to figure out exactly where to go. This is a situation here on this building where you might want to switch to the B brush and maybe take the flow down to 35% or less, because in this particular part of the image you can see that that building is catching the reflection of the sunset in the distance, and so we don't want the intensity to be quite as much on that section of the building, but we still want it to be included in this section of the localized adjustments. So just painting it in just lightly, it comes in at a much lighter opacity, much less affected than the rest of the area. Because remember, the darker the red, the more the effect is going to have on that section of the image. So see, this section of the image is not going to get as much of the effect of the local adjustment. And then you can switch back to brush A and keep on going about making your really dark areas be part of your adjustment. So now you can see that I've got these areas kind of painted in a little bit. Now I can come back in with a bigger brush. Now that I've gone around the edges, and I can use a bigger brush to come in and paint the rest of it. Going right out to my edges and painting it all in. The only reason I showed you all of that in fast forward is to show that there are no other tricks. I'm not pulling I'm not pulling the wool over on you. I'm not trying to trick anybody. This is just a really easy tool that when you take the time to use it can really make for a better edit on an image. And it can show that you're taking a little more time on your edit and putting out a little bit better product. That has a little better quality look to it than just a real cheap and quick dirty edit on an image. I always like to take my time on it and make sure I'm doing the best that I can and putting out the best version of an image I can. If it takes me a couple of hours to edit an image, then so be it. I know not everyone feels that way, but I feel like if you're going to go ahead and spend a couple of hours to go out and shoot a sunset like I did on this particular scene, take the time to do the edit right. Use all of the tools that you have available to you. I'm amazed at the number of people that don't know about tools like this in Lightroom. I talk to people all the time when I'm doing my editing presentations for photography clubs, and people are not aware of all of these little tools that you have at your disposal. And so I'm just showing a little bit about what there is out there as an option for editing your image. I'm not going to worry about this side over here too much because I'm planning on cropping a lot of that side out on the final edit of this image anyway. But now you can see I'm just going to come in and paint the rest of that. Get it all painted nice and red. And now I can turn it off and I can adjust all sorts of parameters on just that area. I can bring the shadows up by using the exposure instead of shadows. I can change the tint, warming it up to match the color of the sky because it's reflected light. The sky was reflecting a really nice warm color that night. It was not as cool as the lifted shadows would make it appear. So adding a little bit of that warmth back in, adding a little bit of the contrast back. You want to make sure you put some contrast back in anytime you're lifting the shadows, because lifting the shadows is raising the blacks. So I always try to add back some of that contrast so that we can see what it looks like with a little more contrast added back into it. Again, add just a little bit of texture, a little bit of clarity to bring back some of the contrast and darks. And again, a little bit of dehaze just to bring back some of the character and the warmth that was there in person. But you can't do any of that if you're just editing the highlights and the shadows on a global scale. It's not possible. So take control of these high dynamic range scenes. Use the tools that are available to you. That really didn't take me that long. It took me, less than 10 minutes in real time to do that. And that allows you to really have fine control over your edits of your image. I'm going to go ahead and finish the edits on this image, and then I'll put the final edits on screen and show the progression of this particular image from straight out of camera through my edits, through the final edit that ended up being delivered to the client for this particular image. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video this evening. If there's something that you're working on that you don't quite understand or want to learn about, leave me a message down there in the comments. Maybe I can tackle it in the next video. If you like that one, hit the thumbs up button. If you haven't subscribed, please do. And until next time, may the good light find you.